Good morning. This is an exciting moment because with a copy of Lando in hand, I'm about to start recording the first CGR 2085 podcast, My Love Affair with Star Wars. Gotta get in the mood. It's gonna be smooth like Lando, but not that smooth because nothing could be that smooth. A long time from now in a galaxy not that far away, lives a man named Future Mark, who loves Star Wars. It's the year 2085, and I welcome you to the first Classic Game Room podcast, CGR 2085, My Love Affair with Star Wars. You see, Future Mark believes that Star Wars is the single most influential movie of all time. And I know what you're thinking. Future Mark can sense your thoughts from the future, even though you're in the past. How can Star Wars be more influential than RoboCop and Black Belt Jones? Good question. Before I answer it, though, let's kick off the first CGR 2085 Future Review with my review of the Star Wars 1977 double LP soundtrack. Like the movies themselves, the Star Wars soundtrack is still fun and relevant today, and this is a really nice record set, by the way. It's got a great picture of Darth Vader on the back, and the inside, when you open it up, has a bunch of scenes from the movie. And this is just something that's completely lost today with digital downloads. It was pretty much killed off with CDs because they weren't nearly as large as album covers. One of the many reasons that I enjoy collecting vinyl is that I like either opening up the record if it's a gatefold record like this, or sliding out the record and reading the inserts, and enjoying the artwork and the writing on the inside. It's an experience. Beyond the music, there's an actual relationship between you and the physical media. When you take this giant disc and place it onto your turntable and gently lower the needle, you're greeted with some soothing crackling and popping, followed by an explosion of music, depending on which record it is. And I think it goes without saying that Star Wars wouldn't be half what it is today were it not for the amazing orchestral score composed by John Williams. The music for the film and this record was performed by the London Symphony Orchestra, and there's some notes from John Williams in here. It's a lot of fun to listen to the Star Wars soundtrack because it isolates the music and removes the distraction of the video and sound effects and dialogue, and allows the listener to focus on the music, which transports you, and by you I mean me, back to a time when Star Wars was new. So dim the lights, turn up the hi-fi stereo, of course, and soak in that Star Wars soundtrack. But let me answer my earlier question. Why is Star Wars more influential than other amazing movies like Black Belt Jones and RoboCop? Well, Black Belt Jones is one of my favorite action films. It's a fun film, but it's hard to say that it really influenced cinema for the next forever. And RoboCop, another one of my favorite films, is less influential and more an accurate depiction of the future. Have you ever watched the news segments closely in RoboCop? It's like watching the news today with more 80s hair. Star Wars didn't invent science fiction, but it changed science fiction. It made it marketable, profitable, and approachable for the masses. Without Star Wars, we wouldn't have Star Trek as we know it today. And sure, Star Trek the TV show debuted in the 60s and was quite revolutionary in its own right. The Star Trek movies would have never been greenlit were it not for the huge financial success of Star Wars. And we definitely would have never enjoyed awesome TV shows like Buck Rogers in the 25th Century and Battlestar Galactica. Prior to Star Wars, science fiction was more social commentary placed into a future landscape than actual space exploration, fun, and excitement. And you can see that in movies like Planet of the Apes, Silent Running, Logan's Run, Westworld, and George Lucas's own THX 1138. When science fiction was really driven by fear of the future combined with the civil rights movement. But there's been books written about this. Where did my love affair with Star Wars begin? Let's take a trip back in time to the year 1980, when I was 5 years old. My dad took me to see The Empire Strikes Back, which is the second Star Wars movie. Sadly, I missed the first one in the theater, although apparently I did see Jaws in utero. So I had some early exposure to John Williams' music, but for a generation of us, at least those of us who grew up in the 70s and the 80s, our love affair with Star Wars begins with the characters and the action figures, because beyond just watching the movies, we could create our own movies with the Star Wars toys, which remain the greatest toys in the history of ever. For starters, they're nearly indestructible. Now that many of us have kids, you know that these things withstand generations of abuse, unless you go after them with a soldering iron. So there you go, there's a look at the recording session for the first CGR 2085 podcast. I'm going to go over all those takes, listen to them closely, assemble them, add some music and sound effects where necessary, adjust the pacing, and the rest of the podcast will feature a review of Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and continued exploration into how Star Wars has changed, how I've changed, and how I think a whole new generation of kids now views Star Wars as a brand rather than a movie or a series of movies. So lots of things I can talk about with Star Wars. So hopefully you'll enjoy the podcast. Please let me know what you think so I can make improvements to the next ones. This will be a Patreon backer exclusive coming out at the end of January. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/classicgameroom. So once again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you. May the Force be with you always.